justified in intervening in the internal political processes of other countries to attempt to stop human rights abuses. Before we begin off, the following definitions to ground from Merriam-Webster's dictionary unless otherwise noted. Justified, to prove or show to be just, right, moral, or reasonable. I define intervening as deriving from Christopher Greenwood's Is There a Right of Humanitarian Intervention? A state's actions are only considered intervention on the basis of human rights when those helped or threatened with death or suffering on a grand scale. This means that in order for our debate to discuss the given resolution, we have to be discussing instances when people are threatened with death or grand suffering. Internal political processes. Procedure followed to resolve important issues that concern a large number of people refers to legal activities or citizens change public policy. Attempt. To make an effort to achieve or complete something with knowledge, reasonable chance of success. Human rights. Rights is freedom from unlawful imprisonment, torture, and execution regarded as belonging fundamentally to all persons from both law. Abuses, improper use, misuse. Observation 1. I observe that because the resolution does not specify a method of intervention, because Lincoln Douglas's debate is focused on values rather than plans, this debate must only be centered on the principle of intervention rather than specific forms of intervention as a whole. Furthermore, debating the specific forms of intervention would be impractical in that the actual form of intervention would depend on the particular situation. Thus, it is unrealistic and abusive for the affirmative to have to uphold and defend every instant of intervention. It is also unfair and abusive for the negative so that if you vote affirmative, the United States has to intervene in every case of human rights abuse. Observation 2. According to the 2012-2013 National Forensic League High School Competitive Events Guide, Lincoln information is on a proposition of value concerns itself with ought to be instead of what is. Merriam-Webster defined the word ought as having to express duty or moral obligation. Therefore, I observe that the debate today should be, therefore, be concerned with what our actions should be morally. The only way that negative can win is to prove that the inherent moral obligation doesn't exist. Observation 3. I observe that by the definition of humanitarian intervention, the resolution limits my opponent and I to debate within the topical confines of what is considered humanitarian intervention, which are restricted to cases in which a substantial part of the population of the state is threatened with death or suffering on a grand scale, either because of the actions of the government of that state or because the state slide into anarchy. My value for this ground will be that of morality. In order to evaluate morality on an international level, I'm evaluating my value through the standard of natural law. Holtz, 2003. Natural law is the naturalist doctrine that human beings have certain moral duties by virtue of their common humanity. Its basic precepts are discovered through reason and therefore are available to anyone capable of rational thought. Like human nature, they are also universal and immutable. For natural law theorists, our common human nature generates common moral duties, including right of humanity and intervention. Our moral obligations to others are not limited to people with whom we are bound in community by contract, legal ties, or common locale. We are obligated to help whoever we can and to be ready to form and protect decent relationships with them. This general duty to help others is the most basic ground within this common morality. Dr. Robert Lowry Clinton, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, discussed that the U.S. Constitution rests on common law, which in turn rests on natural law. By evaluating this round through natural law, we see that our moral obligation is to reach out and help those who are having their natural rights infringed upon in order to achieve a common morality, thereby upholding human rights and achieving our basic moral obligation, thus upholding my value of morality. Contention 1. Protecting human rights is the most moral action. Pogge, 2000. The concept of a human right has certain central elements that any plausible understanding of human rights must incorporate. First, human rights express ultimate moral concerns. Persons have a moral duty to respect human rights, a duty that does not derive from a more general moral duty to comply with national and international legal instruments. In fact, conformity with human rights is a moral requirement in any legal order whose capacity to create moral obligations depend in part on such conformity. Impact. Human rights are not relative. They are universal in that every human has a right to such rights. On large scale, it is immoral under every scope to allow human rights abuses to continue, which leads to the state would be acting against every ethical law laid out under international interactions. Under the idea of natural law, we see we are morally obligated to reach out to help those in need because of a common bond of humanity. Thus, by reaching out to help those in need and protecting human rights, we fulfill our obligation under natural law and thus morality. Subpoint A. Each state as a rational actor carries a moral obligation to prevent harm to others. Glanville, 2012. The Roman philosopher Cicero argued that there were two types of injustice. Men may inflict injury, or else, when it is being inflicted upon others, they may fail to deflect it, even though they could. Justice was said to entail not merely negative duties to refrain from perpetuating harm, but also positive duties to protect others from harm. The man who does not defend someone or obstruct the injustice when he can is at fault, just as if he had abandoned his parents, friends, or country. He insisted that duties were not only owed to those close to us, but also to strangers and foreigners. Those who suggested otherwise were said to tear apart the common fellowship of the human race. Impact. Because the United States has the ability to intervene in human rights abuses, it would be immoral of the United States not to do so. Because the United States has the ability to and has the moral obligation to intervene in human rights abuses and to minimize the suffering of others, it is justified in doing so. Failure to abide by these international norms results in the destruction of the common fellowship of the human race. When we recognize this common fellowship and step in to protect human rights, we reach our obligation under natural law and thus achieve morality. Subpoint B. Basic humanitarian ethics agree. Being a fellow human is enough to take action against human rights abuses against others. Gomes, 2010. 17th century natural law philosophers argue that because unpunished violations of natural law by one sovereign within the state of nature harm every other sovereign by undermining natural law, every sovereign possesses the right to enforce natural law against any other government that is guilty of violating it. Hugo Grotius in 1631 asserts that under natural law intervention is permissible for sovereign atrocity against its citizens conspicuous. Samuel Pufendorf in 1667 contends that a war may be made by a person not only for himself but for another, and where there is no other reason, the common relation alone of men to men may be sufficient when the party employing our aid is unjustly oppressed. To engage our endeavors as far as convenience, we are able to promote his defense. Impact. By denying aid or by rejecting the idea of natural law in response to human rights atrocities, the acting sovereign violates the rights to and harms other sovereigns. When we protect human rights, it links into natural law, and thus the United States is justified in intervening in human rights abuses in that it protects international rights and surrounding states under every moral ideology, thus achieving my value of morality. That was a little fast.